In the snowy mountains of Idaho, a retired Navy SEAL had almost stopped fighting for his own life. Then one evening, under a lonely street lamp, he saw a starving German shepherd struggling through the snow. A broken tracking collar was twisted around her neck, caught to a plastic canister she could not escape. Emmett Kessler did not know her name or the quiet lie hidden inside that collar. He only knew her eyes looked like his own heart, tired, guarded, and still asking not to be left behind. Before the storm was over, the dog he rescued would drag him away from a danger he could not see. Stay with this story until the end, and if it touches your heart, tell us where you're watching from. Like and subscribe to help us reach 5,000 subscribers. In Alder Creek, Idaho, winter did not arrive like a season. It came like an old king returning to a throne no one had been brave enough to challenge. It laid its white hand over the roofs, the roads, the pine branches, the broken fence lines, and the forgotten things people had pushed into barns because they could not bear to throw them away. By late afternoon, the whole town seemed carved from bone and silence. Emmett Kessler lived at the edge of it. His cabin stood where the last narrow road gave up and became a private track through the trees. It was not a lonely place by accident. Emmett had chosen it because distance required no explanation. A man could live far enough out that no one knocked unless something was wrong, and in Emmett's life, almost everything that knocked had brought bad news. He was 53 years old, broad-shouldered, tall, and still built with the hard economy of a man trained to carry weight without complaint. His body had not forgotten the Navy, even if the Navy had become a country behind him, one he could visit only in dreams and hospital forms. He wore an old olive-drab combat shirt most days, the torso fitted, the camouflage sleeves worn pale at the elbows and striped across the upper arms. It looked less like a uniform now and more like something a man kept wearing because civilian clothes asked too many questions. 19 months had passed since Fern died. Emmett didn't mark the number out loud. He did not say, "It has been 19 months." He did not tell the cashier at Mabel's grocery, or the young man who delivered propane, or the nurse who called twice a week about appointments he kept avoiding. But his house knew. Fern's wool slippers still sat beside the stove, toes pointed toward the warmth as if she might return from the kitchen and slip into them. Her blue scarf hung on the peg behind the back door. Her cracked white mug, the one with a tiny green leaf painted near the handle, remained on the shelf above the sink. Emmett had moved it once, early on, and the sight of the empty space had struck him so sharply that he put it back with the care of a man returning a relic to an altar. The objects did not speak. That was the problem. They did not speak, and yet they filled the cabin with noise. The slippers accused him softly. The scarf waited. The mug remembered the shape of Fern's hand better than Emmett trusted himself to remember her voice. Outside, snow tapped against the windows in small, patient fingers. Inside, the fire burned low. Emmett stood at the counter and stared at a prescription bottle he had not opened. His doctor in Boise had used clean words, professional words, words polished smooth by training: advanced liver disease, significant risk, treatment options, monitoring. He had spoken as though Emmett were a man standing at a crossroads. Emmett had heard something else. He had heard a sentence being handed down by a judge he had stopped arguing with long ago. The illness had become, in some bleak corner of his mind, the only loyal thing left. It stayed. It did not vanish in a flash of heat and dust like the 2 men he had lost overseas. It did not leave behind slippers and a scarf like Fern. It did not ask him to improve, to heal, to attend meetings, to breathe through panic, to make soup instead of coffee for dinner. It simply waited inside him. There was comfort in that, though he knew it was a bitter kind of comfort, like licking snow from a knife blade and calling it water. A siren rose somewhere beyond town. The sound was thin at first, almost swallowed by the storm. Then it sharpened, climbing through the trees. Emmett's hand closed around the edge of the counter. The cabin disappeared. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, he was not in Idaho. He was on his back beneath a broken sky, grit in his teeth, metal twisted above him, someone shouting his name from too far away. There had been light, then smoke, then a silence so wide it seemed to have swallowed the world before spitting out only pieces of it. The siren faded. The cabin returned by inches, the counter beneath his palm, the prescription bottle, the stove, Fern's mug. Emmett drew one breath, then another. He did not call it fear. He had not called it fear in years. Men like him were trained to rename terror until it sounded like weather, fatigue, bad timing, a rough night. He put the prescription bottle back in the drawer. "Not today," he muttered. The words had become a ritual. Not today for the hospital, not today for the counselor, not today for the unopened envelope from the Veterans Clinic, not today for living with both hands instead of one. By 4:30, the light was already leaving. Emmett pulled on his canvas coat, took his keys from the hook, and drove toward town because the cabin was out of coffee, and a man could pretend many things, but not that chicory tea was coffee. His old truck complained as it rolled down the private track, tires crunching over snow that had frozen, thawed, and frozen again into ruts. Alder Creek appeared slowly, not as a place but as a collection of yellow windows floating in the storm. The grocery store, the post office, the closed barber shop with a hand-painted sign, the old gas station at the north edge of town, its pumps wrapped in plastic, its sign dark except for one street lamp that still worked when it felt like it. That was where Emmett saw the black shape. At first he thought it was a trash bag blown loose by the wind. Then it moved against the snow with the uneven, struggling motion of something alive. He eased his foot off the gas. The shape staggered beneath the street lamp. A dog. A German shepherd, though smaller than it should have been, thin enough that the wet fur clung to the angles of its body. Black and tan, female, young, maybe 3. Her coat was matted with snow and road slush. Her hips rose too sharply beneath the fur. One ear stood high, the other tilted slightly, not from playfulness, but from tension, as though the world had whispered danger into it too many times. Something was caught around her neck. Emmett stopped the truck. For a moment, he did not move. The dog jerked her head, and a dull plastic thud sounded through the storm. A dented jug or canister, the kind people used for antifreeze or oil, swung from the cracked tracking collar at her throat. The broken strap had twisted through the canister's handle. Every time she tried to shake free, the plastic slammed against her chest and pulled the collar sideways. She let out a thin sound, not a bark, not quite a cry. It was a small, unwilling noise, the kind made by a creature trying very hard not to need anyone. Emmett felt something old shift in him, not hope. Hope was too bright a word, too reckless. This was smaller and heavier. Recognition, maybe. The strange ache of seeing another living thing trapped by what someone else had strapped to it and forgotten. He opened the truck door. The dog froze. Her eyes locked on him. They were amber brown and wet, but not soft, not pleading. She looked at him the way soldiers looked at doorways in unfamiliar streets, measuring distance, exit routes, the weight of a hand, the speed of harm. "It's all right," Emmett said. The dog tucked her tail and backed away. He stopped immediately. Snow collected on his shoulders. The wind pushed at his coat. A passing gust rocked the hanging canister against the dog's chest, and she flinched as though struck. Then she turned toward the pines behind the gas station. If she made it into the timber, he might never find her again. Emmett knew this with the clean certainty of a man who had tracked movement in worse places than Idaho snow. He also knew that chasing her would be the fastest way to lose her. So he did not chase. Instead, he stepped back from the truck, slowly lowered himself to one knee, and removed his gloves. The cold bit him at once. He placed the gloves on the snow. Then he took out the folding knife from his coat pocket, opened it, closed it again, and set it on the ground in front of him. The knife had a walnut handle darkened by years of use. Fern had given it to him on their 15th anniversary because, as she had said, if you insist on carrying something sharp everywhere, it should at least be handsome. The memory nearly broke his concentration. He pushed it gently aside. The dog watched the knife, then his hands, then his face. "I see it," he said quietly. "I see where it hurts." The dog did not come closer. Neither did he. For several minutes, nothing happened. Snow fell between them like a curtain being lowered over a stage. The old gas station creaked in the wind. Somewhere, a loose chain clicked against metal, and the dog trembled at the sound. Emmett shifted his weight and sat fully in the snow. His knees protested, his back ached, the cold soaked through his pants. He ignored it. He spoke because silence had once been useful to him, but now it felt too much like the cabin. "Had a wife who used to say I talked better to broken machines than people," he said. "She wasn't wrong. I fixed the furnace once by threatening it for 20 minutes. The dog's tilted ear moved. "That count as conversation?" he asked. The dog lowered her head, not in trust, but in exhaustion. Emmett took a small piece of jerky from his coat pocket, broke it in half, and tossed it gently to the snow between them. It landed well short of her paws. She stared at it, then at him, then back at it. The canister bumped her chest again when she moved. She winced and froze. Hunger and fear stood on either side of her like two wolves, each waiting for the other to blink. At last, she stretched her neck, snatched the jerky, and retreated 3 steps. Emmett looked away while she ate. It was an old courtesy. Some creatures could not bear to be watched while accepting help. The wind grew sharper. He could no longer feel the tips of his fingers. He waited. 10 minutes became 20. 20 became more. He did not know exactly how long. Time in the snow lost its edges. The world narrowed to the space between his hand and the dog's collar. When she finally took one limping step toward him, it felt less like progress and more like a pardon. "Easy," he whispered. She stopped. He did not reach. Another step. The cracked tracker hung crooked under her jaw. The skin beneath looked raw where the strap had rubbed. The plastic canister was caught badly, twisted into the broken loop, and each movement tightened it. "You don't owe me trust," he said. "Just a second." The dog stood close enough now that he could smell cold fur, old fear, and the faint chemicals stink from the plastic. Her whole body shook. Her eyes never left his hands. Emmett picked up the knife. She flinched. He stopped again, lowered the blade, and let her see it. "Not for you," he murmured. "For that thing?" Very slowly, he slid 2 fingers under the twisted strap to keep it away from her skin. The dog made that small sound again. Her legs stiffened, her lips trembled, but she did not bite. Emmett cut the plastic handle first. The canister dropped. It hit the snow with a hollow thump. Such a small sound. Yet to Emmett, it rang like a bell in some ruined temple, announcing that one prisoner at least had been unfastened from her chain. The dog jumped back, panting, shocked by the sudden absence of weight. She stared at the fallen canister as though it might rise and attack her again. "It's done," Emmett said. The dog looked at him. For one fragile second, the storm seemed to hold its breath. Then her legs folded, not dramatically, not like a creature surrendering for effect. She simply sank into the snow because she had spent the last of what she had pretending she could keep running. Emmett moved fast then, but not roughly. He took the blanket from behind the truck seat and wrapped it around her. She trembled harder at first, then less. When he lifted her, she was lighter than she should have been. Too much bone, too little warmth. In the truck, she pressed herself against the passenger door, eyes wide, refusing to lie down. The broken collar remained around her neck, loosened now, but not removed. Emmett did not touch it again. Not yet. "Fair enough," he said, starting the engine. "I don't like people messing with my neck either." The heater breathed weakly. The dog watched him as he drove, ready to distrust every turn of the wheel. Emmett kept both hands visible. He did not turn on the radio. He did not whistle. He did not fill the quiet with promises he had no right to make. When they reached the cabin, the light over the porch flickered in the storm. Emmett carried her inside, wrapped in the blanket. The warmth of the room met them slowly, like an old dog rising from sleep. He laid her near the stove, but not too close. Animals that had been cold too long needed gentleness, not drama. Fern had taught him that after rescuing a half-frozen barn cat years ago. He could still hear her voice. "Warmth is a fire, Emmett, not an ambush." He placed a bowl of water 5 feet from the dog, then a bowl of soft food beside it, far enough that she would not feel cornered, close enough that she would not have to ask. The dog did not eat. She looked at the food, then the door, then Emmett's hands, then every corner of the cabin. Her body stayed low, ready for the house itself to betray her. Emmett sat on the floor with his back against the cabinet. The position made his hip ache, but he stayed there. Across the room, the slippers beside the stove glowed softly in the firelight. Fern's scarf stirred slightly in a draft from the back door, blue as a piece of summer the winter had failed to bury. The dog's eyes followed the scarf. Emmett followed her gaze. "Fern grew sage outside that door," he said after a while. "Said it kept the smell of summer even when the snow got arrogant." The dog blinked. She liked saying things like that, made plants sound tougher than people. He looked at the bowl, then at the dog. "You need a name," he said. "Can't keep calling you Hay, like we're both pretending this is temporary." The dog did not object. Emmett rubbed his thumb against the place beneath his shirt where Fern's ring rested beside his old dog tag. He had not planned to give anything in this house a name again. Names were hooks. Names tied you to the dock when part of you wanted the river to take you. But the dog had crossed a storm with a broken thing around her throat. She had looked at his hands and, against all available evidence, decided not to bite. That deserved a name. "Sage?" he said softly. The dog's tilted ear moved. "All right then," Emmett whispered. "Sage." Outside, winter pressed its white face to the windows. Inside, the fire held, and for the first time in 19 months, Emmett Kessler was not the only living creature in the cabin waiting to see if morning would come. Sage did not understand warmth. She accepted the cabin the way a wounded traveler might accept shelter in a stranger's barn, grateful enough not to leave, frightened enough not to sleep deeply. The first night, Emmett placed another log in the stove and kept the room warmer than he usually allowed. He did it without admitting why. He told himself the dog needed it. That was true. It was also convenient. Sage lay on the old blanket near the stove for exactly 17 minutes. Then she stood, thin legs trembling, and moved to the back door. She lowered herself there with her chest facing the room and her spine nearly touching the wood. One amber eye watched Emmett. The other watched the dark seam beneath the door, as if winter might slip in wearing boots. She did not curl into a ball. She did not expose her belly. She did not surrender her back to the cabin. Emmett sat in his chair and pretended not to notice. By morning, the fire had burned down to a red memory. Snow had stacked itself against the kitchen window, turning the glass pale and blue. Emmett made coffee strong enough to qualify as poor judgment and warmed a bowl of soft food the way Dr. Livia would later tell him he should have done from the beginning. He set it on the floor, then stepped back. Sage approached as though the bowl were a trap with meat in it. She sniffed, looked at him, sniffed again. Her right ear tilted with that uneasy bend he was already beginning to recognize. "Food," Emmett said. "Not a legal contract?" Sage did not laugh. Dogs rarely appreciated the better parts of his humor. She took 2 mouthfuls, swallowed quickly, then froze. Her eyes moved to the window, the counter, his boots, the hallway. Then she did something that made him lower his coffee mug. She picked up a clump of food in her mouth and carried it beneath the chair by the stove. Emmett watched her tuck it behind one wooden leg. She returned to the bowl, took another piece, and carried it to the edge of the curtain, near the kitchen door. A third piece went behind a stack of old newspapers he had been meaning to throw out for at least a year and a half. A fourth disappeared into one of his winter boots. "Absolutely not," Emmett said. Sage looked at him. He looked at the boot. "That boot has been through enough." She stared a moment longer, then went back for more food. Emmett should have stopped her. A reasonable man would have stopped her. A clean man would have stopped her. But Emmett had not been a reasonable or especially clean man since Fern left the world with her scarf still hanging behind the door. So he let Sage build her tiny, damp empire of stolen meals. At first it irritated him. By noon, the cabin smelled faintly of dog food and betrayal. He found a softened piece beneath the lower shelf where Fern had kept cookbooks. Another sat beside the firewood basket. When he discovered one inside his boot, he held it up between 2 fingers. Sage lowered her head. "I'm not mad," he said. She did not believe him. That was the first thing about Sage that hurt. She did not believe kindness until it had survived testing. By the second day, Emmett understood the pattern. Sage would eat just enough to quiet the urgent pain in her body, then hide the rest. Not randomly, not carelessly. She chose places close to walls, places with cover, places she could reach without crossing open floor. If food could be taken, she meant to have some portion of it beyond reach, a small reserve against a future that, in her mind, was already approaching with empty hands. Late that afternoon, he found a piece of kibble near Fern's wool slippers. It sat between them like an offering. Emmett stood very still. The stove clicked. Wind moved against the window. Sage watched from the back door, tense, waiting to see what law she had broken. Emmett crouched slowly and picked up the piece. It was absurd. A bit of dog food beside an old pair of slippers. There should have been nothing holy in it. Yet the sight struck him with a tenderness so sudden he had to turn his face toward the sink. Fern would have known what to do. She would have crouched, spoken softly, and made some joke about the dog paying rent in installments. She would have told Emmett not to loom. She would have said hunger had its own memory, and memory could not be scolded out of a body. Emmett placed the food back where Sage had left it. "All right," he said quietly. "She can have that one." Sage blinked. It was not trust, not yet. But later, when Emmett rose to refill the stove, she did not jump as sharply as before. That evening, he opened the drawer beneath the counter to get matches and saw what he had hidden there. The prescription bottle, the folded appointment paper from the clinic in Boise, a sealed envelope from the veterans' office, a letter addressed to the sister of one of the men he had lost, written in his own hand and never mailed. He stood with the drawer open, feeling the strange shame of recognition. Sage hid food because she did not believe tomorrow would feed her. Emmett hid medicine because some stubborn, broken part of him did not believe tomorrow should have him in it. He closed the drawer before the thought could grow teeth. On the third morning, he called the clinic. Not his clinic, the veterinary clinic. It was easier to make appointments for someone else. Dr. Livia Marsh's office sat near the south end of Alder Creek, in a low building with a green metal roof and a hand-painted sign that read, "Marsh Veterinary Care." Someone had shoveled the walkway, but not very well, leaving ridges of packed snow like little white reefs. Emmett parked close to the entrance and sat for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel. Sage stood in the passenger footwell, refusing the seat, refusing the blanket, refusing the idea that the truck could be a safe place twice in a row. The cracked tracking collar still hung loosely around her neck. Emmett had not removed it. He had touched it only when necessary. The skin beneath needed care, but he knew the difference between help and invasion. He had learned it from medics, from Fern, and from every nightmare that had arrived wearing good intentions. "We go in," he said. "They look at you. We leave. No speeches." Sage panted once, shallow and uncertain. "Exactly," he said. "I hate speeches, too." Inside, the clinic smelled of disinfectant, wet fur, and coffee that had given up on being coffee around dawn. A gray cat slept on the reception counter beneath a sign that said, "Please do not pet Marshall unless Marshall requests legal representation." The cat opened one eye at Emmett, judged him, and returned to sleep. A woman stepped out from the exam room, wiping her hands on a towel. She was in her mid-40s, with chestnut hair tied low at the nape of her neck and a teal stethoscope looped around her shoulders. Her white coat had seen too many emergencies to look ceremonial. There was a small scratch across one knuckle and a steadiness in her face that made the room feel less likely to panic. "You must be Emmett," she said. He nodded. "And this is?" He looked down at Sage. The dog pressed herself behind his leg, but did not bolt. "Sage," he said. Dr. Livia Marsh did not smile too quickly. She did not bend over Sage or make bright noises. She lowered herself onto a rolling stool several feet away, turned slightly sideways, and let the dog study her. "Hello, Sage," she said, her voice low enough that it seemed meant for the floorboards as much as the dog. "You've had a hard road, haven't you?" Sage's tilted ear moved. Emmett noticed. Livia noticed too, but neither of them made a celebration of it. The examination took time because Livia did not rush fear. She checked Sage's eyes, gums, paws, ribs, hydration, and the raw places around the neck where the collar had rubbed. Sage trembled through most of it. Twice she tried to retreat behind Emmett. Once, when a metal tray clinked, she flattened herself so fast that Emmett felt his own chest tighten. Livia paused immediately. "No more tray," she said, and moved it to the counter. It was such a simple kindness that Emmett looked away. After the exam, Livia washed her hands and leaned against the counter, not quite blocking the door. "She's underweight," she said. "Dehydrated, but not dangerously. Paw pads are worn, nails uneven, neck is irritated from the collar rubbing and pulling. I don't see anything that explains the food behavior physically." "She eats," Emmett said, "then hides most of it." "How much?" "Enough to turn my cabin into a pantry with opinions." Livia's mouth twitched. "Under furniture? And boots? Curtains?" "Unfortunately." "Corners near exits?" Emmett looked at her. "Yes." Livia nodded, not surprised. "That isn't her stomach talking. That's memory." The words settled between them. Sage stood near Emmett's boot, exhausted from the exam, but still alert. Livia crouched slowly and placed a small dish of water on the floor, then slid it halfway toward her. Sage did not drink until Livia looked away. "Dogs who've gone without food, or who've had food taken, often stop believing meals are permanent," Livia said. "They eat enough to survive the moment and hide the rest from whatever tomorrow might do." Emmett said nothing. Livia glanced at him once, careful and brief, as if she had noticed more than the dog. "Can that change?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "But not because you prove it once, because you prove it every day and don't get offended when she doubts you." Emmett looked down at Sage. "That sounds familiar," he said. Livia gave him a look that was almost a smile and almost not. "Most useful things do." She scanned Sage for a microchip next. The small device beeped near the dog's shoulder. Livia read the number from the scanner, typed it into her computer, and waited. A line appeared. Then another. Her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough for Emmett to notice. "What?" he asked. "The chip is active," she said. "But the registration doesn't list a private owner. It points to a training facility outside Boise. Looks like it closed about a year ago." "Closed?" Livia clicked through another screen. "Final contact forwards to an organization called Alder Companion Veterans." Emmett frowned. "Here? Regional, I think. They did service dog support, veterans, mobility needs, PTSD assistance, remote tracking, that sort of thing. I saw one of their presentations at a veterinary conference a few years back." She picked up the phone. Emmett stood still while she called. Sage leaned against his boot, not affectionately yet, but because it was the largest object in the room that had not tried to examine her. Livia gave the chip number, then the collar description, then Sage's approximate age and condition. The voice on the other end was too faint for Emmett to hear, but he watched Livia's face become less open. "I understand," she said. "But the dog was found in hazardous winter conditions with a damaged device around her neck." A pause. "No, I'm not asking for donor records. I'm asking whether there is an owner or handler who should be notified." Another pause. "Inactive," Livia repeated. Her eyes moved once toward Emmett. "And completed?" The room seemed to grow colder in a way the heater could not answer. Livia wrote something down. "Who marked it completed?" The answer must not have been useful because her jaw set slightly. When she hung up, she did not speak right away. Emmett waited. "They say the case is inactive," she said. "And completed." "They won't tell me more without a formal request." "Completed means what?" "In their language, probably that the dog was assigned, processed, transferred, retired, or buried, under whatever word keeps the filing cabinet quiet." Emmett looked at Sage. The dog was watching the door. Livia turned her attention to the collar. "I want to check this before I send you home. The battery casing looks wrong." The collar did not come off easily. Livia had to clip away a section of cracked strap, while Emmett held Sage steady without gripping too hard. The dog trembled, but she allowed it. Perhaps she was too tired to fight. Perhaps some part of her understood this room was trying to remove, not add, burdens. On the counter, the tracking device looked cheaper than it had on her neck. Brittle black plastic, clouded lens, frayed strap. The kind of technology that promised safety in a brochure and then surrendered to the first serious winter. Livia put on gloves and opened the outer casing with a small tool. "Battery swelling," she said. "Not severe, but enough that I don't want this against her skin. If it leaked or heated, it could have caused more irritation." Emmett's face hardened. Livia lifted a tiny internal board beneath the plastic shell. She narrowed her eyes, adjusted the lamp, and read the small printed code aloud. ACV SD 4179. Emmett repeated it silently. It did not sound like a dog's name. It sounded like a shelf, a grant entry, a number printed beside a checkbox. Livia wrote it down beneath the chip number. "That normal?" Emmett asked. "No," she said. "One word, no drama. Worse than drama." "What is it?" "I don't know yet, but it isn't a standard veterinary chip number, and it isn't the manufacturer's serial printed outside the case. It looks internal." "Internal to who?" Livia looked at the device, then at Sage, who had lowered herself to the floor and placed her muzzle between her paws. "Alder Companion Veterans would be my first guess." Emmett felt the old instinct rise in him, not the loud one that belonged to danger, but the quiet one that belonged to patterns. Mismatched answers. A closed facility. A damaged device. A dog left in snow. A case marked completed by someone who did not have to look at the living creature attached to the paperwork. He did not like where the pieces pointed. He liked even less that they pointed anywhere at all. Livia packed ointment for Sage's neck, soft food for the next few days, and printed a copy of the microchip result. She did not tell Emmett to investigate. She did not have to. The question had already entered the room and made itself comfortable. "Keep meals predictable," she said. "Same place. Same times if you can. Don't punish hiding. Just clean what spoils and leave her enough to learn the bowl comes back." Emmett nodded. "And you?" she asked. He looked up. "You have someone checking on you?" The question landed more softly than it should have, which somehow made it harder. "I have a dog hiding food in my footwear," he said. "That is not the same thing." "No," he admitted. "But it's new?" Livia let the answer stand. On the drive home, Sage lay down for the first time. Not fully. Her head remained lifted. Her eyes watched the windshield, the road, the sweep of wipers, but her body had stopped bracing against the door. Emmett drove slowly through the falling snow. The paper with the chip information and the code sat folded in his coat pocket. It felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. At the cabin, Sage returned to her place by the back door. Emmett set down fresh water and soft food. She ate 3 bites, then carried one piece toward the curtain. He did not stop her. Later, while the stove ticked and the wind pressed white hands against the glass, Emmett found himself sitting on the floor again, not far from her, but not close enough to demand anything. Sage lay with her eyes open, facing the door. "You belong to somebody?" he asked quietly. Her ear moved. "Or did somebody just decide you didn't?" The cabin gave no answer. The fire folded in on itself. Emmett looked at the healed places that had never healed, at the dog who would not turn her back on a warm room, at the piece of paper in his coat pocket with a code that sounded less like a name than a receipt. He had no plan to become part of anything, no crusade, no righteous mission. He was too tired for banners, too sick for speeches, too practiced at loss to trust the first spark of purpose. He only wanted to know whether anyone had looked for her. And sometime after midnight, when Sage was still awake by the door and the hidden pieces of food waited in corners like small prayers against famine, Emmett understood something that made the room feel larger and colder. Some creatures were not lost because they had forgotten the way home. Some were lost because someone had decided not to search. Dr. Livia Marsh did not hand Emmett a mystery and call it destiny. She handed him a phone number. "That's Mara Whitcomb," she said, writing the name on the back of Sage's printed microchip report. "She helps veterans with benefit claims, appeals, missing records, anything that requires arguing with a system that has more folders than conscience." Emmett stood in the clinic lobby with Sage pressed behind his leg. The dog had tolerated the second layer of ointment on her neck, but tolerance had cost her. Her eyes had that glassy, faraway look of a creature who had stayed brave longer than she wanted to. "I'm not looking for a lawyer," Emmett said. "No one ever is," Livia replied. "People look for a door. Lawyers just know where some of the hinges are hidden." He looked at the number. The code from the tracking device, ACVSD 4179, sat on the paper like a thorn. "I just want to know if someone owns her," he said. Livia's expression softened, but not enough to become pity. "Then ask properly. If Alder Companion veterans marked her case completed, they may not answer you. Mara can make them answer differently." Emmett folded the paper and tucked it into his coat pocket. Sage watched the motion, then watched the door. She had begun to understand the truck meant movement, but not yet whether movement meant danger or return. Outside, snow slid from the clinic roof in soft avalanches. Alder Creek looked as though the whole town had been erased and redrawn in chalk. Emmett didn't call Mara that day. He drove home. He set out food. Sage ate 3 bites and carried one piece behind the curtain, as if fulfilling a religious duty. He cleaned the spoiled pieces from under the chair and left the dry ones where she could find them. He opened the drawer with his prescriptions, stared at the bottle, and closed it again. The number stayed in his pocket. By evening, it felt heavier than the knife. The next morning, after Sage placed a piece of food inside his left boot with the solemnity of a banker making a deposit, Emmett made the call. Mara Whitcomb answered on the fourth ring with, "If this is about the printer, I have already apologized to it, and it remains unforgiving." Emmett blinked. "This is Emmett Kessler. Dr. Marsh gave me your number." A pause. "Oh," Mara said. "Good. A human problem. Those are sometimes easier than printers." Her office was above a laundromat on Cedar Street, in a narrow building that smelled of dryer sheets, wet wool, old coffee, and the particular dust that gathered around legal paperwork. The stairs creaked under Emmett's boots. Sage climbed them slowly, keeping close to the wall, nose working along every old scent left by strangers and detergent. Mara's door was open. Inside, the heater rattled with the stubborn rhythm of a goat trapped in a tin shed. A printer sat in the corner displaying a red error light like a single angry eye. Stacks of folders leaned against one another in uneasy alliances. On the desk, 3 mugs held pens, 1 mug held what might have once been tea, and a yellow pencil lay across an open file as if guarding it. Mara Whitcomb looked up over thin-framed glasses. She was not the sort of person people imagined when they imagined someone taking on a charitable organization with glossy brochures and smiling donors. She wore a burgundy sweater too large in the sleeves, dark slacks, and a gray cardigan that had given up trying to look professional and settled for warm. Her hair, a dark blonde bob threaded with gray, was clipped on one side by a small metal barrette. Her face was square, alert, and tired in a way that suggested she had spent years reading official letters that began politely and ended by denying someone something necessary. "You brought the dog," she said. "She brought herself," Emmett replied. "I mostly open doors." Mara glanced at Sage. She did not coo. She did not rush. Like Livia, she seemed to understand that sympathy could become another kind of crowding. "Hello, Sage," Mara said. "You may ignore me as much as you need." Sage accepted this offer immediately and stepped behind Emmett. Mara gestured toward the chair across from her desk. "Sit. Tell me the short version first. People always start with the long version when they're nervous." "I'm not nervous." "Then you'll have no trouble giving me the short version." Emmett almost smiled. Almost. He gave her the facts. The old gas station, the broken tracking collar, the canister caught in the strap, Sage's condition, Livia's exam, the microchip leading to a closed training facility, the call to Alder Companion veterans, the words inactive and completed. Then he gave Mara the paper with the code. She took it, adjusted her glasses, and underlined ACVSD 4179 with her yellow pencil. "Pencil?" Emmett asked. "Makes fewer arrogant assumptions than ink." "About what?" "About being right." The printer clicked in the corner, then gave a small defeated beep. Mara ignored it with the dignity of a queen ignoring a fool. She opened a database on her old laptop, then another. She asked Emmett to wait while she made 2 calls, neither of which produced much warmth from the people on the other end. She used phrases like request for clarification, service assignment record, and potential animal welfare concern. Her voice stayed calm. Her pencil moved constantly. Sage lowered herself beneath Emmett's chair. Not asleep. Never asleep, but no longer standing. After nearly 40 minutes, Mara became very still. Emmett knew that stillness. It was the moment before a map changed. "What?" he asked. Mara turned the laptop slightly, but not enough for him to read everything. "That code belongs to a support dog placement file," she said. "Alder Companion veterans logged the case as completed 9 months ago. The dog attached to the file is listed as Sage." Emmett felt his hand tighten on the chair arm. "Handler?" "Jonah Vale," Mara said. "Army veteran, lives near Kettle Lake. About 32 miles from here. So she has someone? Mara did not answer quickly enough. The hesitation was a thin crack in the ice. What else? Emmett asked. According to the record, Jonah received a support dog, tracking device, handler orientation, and follow-up evaluation. Status says stable after placement. Sage shifted under the chair. Her collar tag, temporary, paper from Livia's office, rustled softly. Emmett looked down at the dog, then back at Mara. And you don't believe it? I believe paperwork the way I believe men who say they only had one beer, Mara said, with interest, not trust. She printed the page. The printer protested, shook, swallowed half the sheet, and finally surrendered it with a crooked edge. Mara pulled it free and laid it on the desk. There it was. Sage, ACV SD 4179, placement complete. Recipient, Jonah Vale. Follow-up, stable. A neat little funeral for the truth. Emmett stared at the words until they seemed to blur. Sage crawled out from under the chair and stood beside his boot. Not touching, close enough to be aware. Mara watched the two of them. I can call Jonah, she said, or we can drive out. If this is legitimate, he should know his dog was found. And if it isn't, then he should know that too. The road to Kettle Lake ran west through a valley where the snow lay deep on both sides like sleeping animals. Mara insisted on following in her own small Subaru because, as she put it, if we find a legal problem, I prefer not to be trapped in a truck with a former SEAL and a traumatized German Shepherd while forming my first opinion. Emmett did not argue. He suspected she enjoyed sounding more afraid of him than she actually was. Sage rode in the footwell again for the first 15 miles. Then, somewhere past the Frozen Creek Bridge, she climbed onto the passenger seat. She did not relax. Her head stayed high. Her ears tracked every groan of the truck, every hiss of snow beneath the tires. But she had chosen the seat. Emmett kept his eyes on the road. That's new, he said. Sage ignored him. Big day for furniture. Her tilted ear moved. It was enough. Kettle Lake was not much of a lake in winter. It was a white plain under a low sky, ringed by scrub pine and a half-circle of trailers, sheds, propane tanks, and old vehicles that might or might not ever move again. Jonah Vale lived in a single-wide trailer with blue shutters and a ramp cleared carefully of snow. A small flag near the steps had frozen stiff in the wind. Before Emmett knocked, a radio inside crackled with old country music. Then a man's voice called, "If that's about the driveway, I'm aware it exists." Mara looked at Emmett. Charming? The door opened. Jonah Vale stood with one hand on the frame and the other on a cane. He was around 50, shorter than Emmett, lean in the way men became when life had taken appetite, but not pride. One leg ended below the knee in a basic prosthetic, partly hidden by loose jeans. His hair was cut very short, brown gone gray at the temples, and a trimmed beard framed a face made red by cold and suspicion. His eyes moved first to Emmett, then Mara, then Sage. They stopped there. The silence changed. Behind Jonah, a very large gray cat sat on the arm of a worn recliner, watching the visitors with imperial disappointment. "I'm Mara Whitcomb," Mara said. "We spoke briefly on the phone." Jonah's eyes remained on Sage. "You said this was about a dog." "Yes. I never got a dog." The sentence came too fast, too practiced, like a man had said it many times to people who kept not hearing him. Mara's expression sharpened, but her voice stayed gentle. "That's what we need to talk about." Jonah let them in. The trailer was warm, neat in some places, and chaotic in others. The kind of place where a man kept tools lined perfectly above a workbench, but allowed mail to form geological layers on the kitchen counter. The old radio sat beside the window, volume low. A tin of butter cookies, long since repurposed, rested on the table. The cat followed them with his eyes. "That's Sherman," Jonah said. "He bites only when he feels the legal system has failed." Mara looked at the cat. "Then we may be in danger." Sherman yawned. Sage stayed close to Emmett's left side. When Jonah looked at her, his face did not soften all at once. It resisted softening, then failed. "She's thin," he said. "Better than she was," Emmett replied. Jonah nodded once. "That's not an answer anybody wants to hear and everybody understands." Mara laid out the printed record on the table. Jonah did not sit at first. He leaned on his cane and stared down at his own name in the recipient field. The line claiming stable after placement seemed especially cruel in the warm little trailer beneath the humming light, while the dog it described stood uncertain beside a stranger's boot. "I told them," Jonah said. His voice had gone flat. Mara waited. "I told them I never received her. I called, emailed, left messages. First they said weather-delayed transport. Then they said staffing. Then they said records showed I completed orientation. I said I didn't. They said maybe I was confused." Emmett looked up. Jonah laughed once, without humor. "That's a good trick. Tell a veteran with memory issues that maybe he forgot receiving a whole dog." Mara's pencil stopped moving. Jonah opened the cookie tin and pulled out a stack of folded papers, printed emails, forms, and notes written in block letters. Everything was arranged by date. "I'm not organized," he said. "I'm angry. Looks similar from a distance." Mara took the papers carefully. There were approval emails, a preparation checklist, a message about home readiness, a video link for basic handler commands, then delay notices. Then a final message thanking Jonah for successful participation in the program. No delivery signature, no photograph of placement, no follow-up visit notes written by anyone who seemed to have entered his home. Jonah lowered himself into the chair. Sherman jumped onto the table, sat on the stack of papers, and looked pleased with his contribution. "Sherman," Jonah said. The cat did not move. Mara slid the papers out from under him with the practiced patience of a woman who had negotiated with worse creatures than cats. Jonah glanced at Sage again. "Is she supposed to know me?" "No," Mara said. "Not if she was never placed with you." His shoulders shifted as though he had braced for disappointment and found a different shape of it. "I got a training video," he said. "They told me to practice commands before she arrived. Felt stupid doing it alone." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Did it anyway." Emmett watched him. There was something almost unbearable in that. A man in a small trailer practicing how to call a dog that never came. Making space in his home for a promise that had already been marked, fulfilled somewhere else. Jonah looked embarrassed by his own memory. "One whistle," he said. "Short, then down command, for settling. That's what the trainer said." Mara leaned forward. "Do you remember it?" "Course I remember it. Man can forget where he put his wrench and still remember making a fool of himself in his kitchen." He looked at Emmett. "Mind?" Emmett looked down at Sage. She was tense, but not panicked. Her eyes moved between Jonah and the door. The room was full of signals she did not yet know how to sort. Male voice, small space, cat smell, old paper, radio static, snow boots, and the heat of too many human feelings. "Don't step toward her," Emmett said. Jonah's face tightened at the instruction, then eased. "Wasn't planning to." He whistled. One short note, soft, almost ashamed. Sage's body changed. Not recognition of Jonah. There was no sudden joy, no rush across the room, no miracle reunion for an audience that wanted neatness. She did not know him, but something in her knew the sound. Her ears lowered, her breathing shifted. Slowly, with a care that seemed older than her 3 years, she folded her front legs and lowered herself to the floor. Her chin rested on her paws. The room became very quiet. Even Sherman stopped looking superior for a moment. Jonah stared at Sage. His mouth moved once, but no words came. There are losses that arrive as absence, a chair empty, a phone not ringing, a person not coming home. Then there are losses that stand in front of you breathing, proving that what was taken had fur, eyes, weight, and a name. Jonah turned his face toward the window. Mara looked down at the papers, giving him the mercy of not being watched. Emmett looked at Sage. The dog lay still, but her eyes were open. Her body had obeyed a lesson it had kept buried beneath hunger and fear, a small command from a life that had nearly happened. "She was real," Jonah said at last. Mara's voice was quiet. "Yes. I thought maybe I'd made too much of it." He laughed under his breath. "You start to wonder after enough people tell you the file says otherwise." Emmett knew that too, not in the same shape, but in the same weather. The way records could become walls. The way a man could stand in front of a desk and feel himself reduced to an error no one wanted to correct. Jonah cleared his throat. "So what was she?" Mara sorted the documents and placed the ACV record beside the emails. "Not a fully placed service dog," she said, "at least not according to what we have. More likely a candidate support dog in final training. Enough training to respond to some commands, not enough to be stable in every environment. But the program marked her as delivered to you." "Why?" "Funding," Mara said. The word landed without drama. That made it heavier. Jonah looked at Emmett. "They got paid?" "We don't know everything yet," Mara said. "But programs like this often receive funds when a case is marked complete. Veteran assigned, dog placed, equipment issued, follow-up done." Jonah's jaw worked. "And if the dog runs off before any of that happens?" "Then reporting it would raise questions." The heater clicked. The radio whispered a song about going home. Sage remained on the floor, chin on her paws, watching all of them as if waiting for the next command from a world that had never explained itself fairly. Jonah pushed the cookie tin toward Mara. "Take all of it." Mara hesitated. "You're sure?" "No," he said. "I'm tired." "That isn't the same thing." "No," Jonah agreed, "but it's close enough to get started." He looked at Sage again. This time, the sadness in his face had changed. It was still there, but it no longer pointed only inward. "I don't want to get tangled up in hearings and calls and people pretending they're sorry," he said. Mara nodded. "That may happen." "I know. That's why I don't want it." Emmett understood. The desire to be left alone could look like peace from the outside. From the inside, it was sometimes just exhaustion wearing a clean coat. Jonah tapped the top of the cookie tin. "But if she made it through all that and ended up here, maybe the least I can do is stop letting their version be the only one on paper." Mara's pencil hovered. "May I quote that?" she asked. "No, make me sound smarter." For the first time that day, Emmett almost smiled without stopping himself. Jonah pointed at the papers. "You can have the emails, the checklist, the video link, the thank you message, all of it. I'll sign something if I have to." "You probably will," Mara said. "I figured. People like paperwork almost as much as they like avoiding responsibility." Sage stood slowly, the moment broken by movement. She stepped backward until her shoulder brushed Emmett's leg. Jonah noticed. He did not reach for her. That mattered. "She chose you?" he asked. Emmett looked down at the dog. "No," he said. "She tolerated me first. We're negotiating from there." Jonah nodded. "That's more honest than most relationships." Mara stacked the documents into her bag, careful to keep them dry. Sherman tried to climb inside as well, perhaps sensing a legal proceeding that needed supervision. Jonah lifted the cat with a grunt and set him on the counter. At the door, Jonah stopped Emmett. "I'm not asking for her," he said. Emmett had not realized he had been holding tension in his shoulders until it eased. Jonah saw it and smiled faintly, not offended. "I wanted a dog," he said. "I won't lie, I made space, bought a bed, watched that stupid video 6 times. But she doesn't know me, and whatever happened to her, she found her way to your truck, not my porch." Emmett did not know what to say. Jonah looked past him at Sage. "Just don't let them call her delivered and done. She looks like she's been called done by enough people." The sky had darkened by the time they left. Mara drove ahead, taillights red and soft through the falling snow. Emmett followed more slowly. Sage sat in the passenger seat now, not the footwell. Her body leaned toward the door, but her head turned toward the window, watching Kettle Lake disappear behind them. The frozen lake stretched pale beneath the evening, a sleeping mirror no one dared break. Emmett thought of Jonah in his warm trailer, practicing a whistle for a dog that never came. He thought of the report, stable after placement. He thought of Sage lying down at a sound from a man she did not know because her body remembered training her life had never been allowed to finish. He had started with a simple question. Does this dog belong to someone? Now the question had changed. Who had decided she did not need to arrive? Sage shifted in the seat. One paw rested near the folded papers Mara had copied for him before they left. Her nails clicked once against the folder. Emmett glanced at her. "All right," he said, though she had not asked anything aloud. The road curved into the trees. Snow swept across the headlights in silver lines. He was not looking for a mission. He was not strong enough for one, and he no longer trusted men who mistook anger for purpose. But somewhere between Mara's crooked printout and Jonah's kitchen table, something inside him had moved, not healed, moved. He was no longer just trying to return a lost dog. He was following a stolen promise. Mara Whitcomb did not build a case like a woman hunting treasure. She built it like a woman repairing a bridge in winter, plank by plank, testing each board before allowing anyone to put weight on it. After the visit to Jonah Vale, she stopped talking about a discrepancy and began using quieter words. Pattern, exposure, liability, fraud risk, words with coats on, words that did not want to admit they were afraid of what they were finding. For 3 days, Emmett watched her work from the far side of her office while Sage lay under the desk, never quite asleep. The laundromat below hummed and thumped. The old heater rattled in the corner like a small animal demanding respect. Mara's printer jammed twice, cursed once through its red blinking light, and finally produced a stack of pages crooked enough to look personally offended. Alder Companion veterans had been beloved, or at least well photographed. Their website showed smiling donors in wool coats, veterans shaking hands beneath banners, and dogs sitting nobly beside wheelchairs, canes, and flag displays. Their slogan appeared under nearly every image: "No veteran walks alone." On a social media, they wrote about bringing light back to those who served. In the local paper, their executive director, Renee Calder, was described as a tireless advocate with a heart for service. Mara read that sentence aloud and made a noise in her throat. "You know her?" Emmett asked. "I know the type." Renee Calder appeared in half the photographs. She was polished in the way certain people were polished for public trust. Soft blonde-gray hair brushed into a smooth curve at her shoulders, cream blazer, navy turtleneck, silver paw print pin near her heart. In one photo, she held both hands around the hand of an older veteran as if she were warming him by touch alone. Her smile was wide. Her eyes did not change very much. "She looks kind," Emmett said. Mara underlined something in pencil. "So do donation envelopes." Beside Renee's name, another appeared again and again in procurement documents. Miles Harlan, owner of Harlan Field Systems. His company had provided the tracking collars used in the program's support dog placements. In a profile photo, he wore a black vest over a crisp shirt and stood beside a table of devices arranged like surgical instruments. Clean, minimal, expensive-looking in the way cheap things sometimes tried very hard to appear expensive. "The collars," Emmett said, Mara nodded. Bulk purchase, discounted, weather-resistant according to the contract. Sage shifted under the desk. The word weather seemed to mean nothing to paper. Outside Mara's window, snow had crusted along the sill. Alder Creek moved slowly beneath it, trucks crawling past, people hunched against wind, the laundromat sign flickering when gusts hit the building. It was the sort of town where a charity with a good photographer could become a saint before anyone checked its hands. On paper, the program looked nearly perfect. Each completed case had tidy parts: veteran approved, dog assigned, equipment issued, handler orientation complete, follow-up stable, funds released. The files were so clean they began to feel less like records and more like freshly combed hair over a scar. Mara spread the pages across her desk. "Jonah is not alone," she said. Emmett did not answer. She turned one page toward him. Another veteran, another dog, another device ID, another completed placement. "No delivery signature," Mara said. "Only internal confirmation." Another page. "Here, follow-up completed on a date when the veteran was admitted to a hospital in Twin Falls. Public record notice. They could not have done a home check that day." Another page. "Here, device marked issued and inactive 48 hours later. Case still counted as completed." Emmett looked at the rows. Dogs had become initials. People had become recipient numbers. Loneliness had become an invoice. Sage crawled out from beneath the desk and rested her chin on the toe of Emmett's boot. She did not do it dramatically. She did not look up for praise. She simply put a little of her weight there, as if confirming that he was still in the room. He lowered his hand, stopped halfway, and waited. Sage did not move away. So he touched the top of her head with 2 fingers, lightly, no ownership in it. Mara noticed, but said nothing. A good lawyer knew which evidence belonged in a file and which belonged to silence. Dr. Livia Marsh widened the circle in her own way. She did not have Mara's legal databases, but she had something almost as powerful in a rural county: the phone numbers of people who answered because they trusted her. She called clinics in 3 nearby towns, 2 shelters, 1 mobile vet, and a retired technician who, according to Livia, remembered every animal she had ever handled, and half the owners who should have been handled better. By the end of the week, Livia came to Mara's office with a folder tucked beneath one arm and snow melting on her boots. "I found 3, she said. Emmett looked up. "Dogs?" Mara asked. "3 I can document. Maybe more I can't yet." Livia laid out photographs and intake notes. A black lab mix found near an abandoned equipment shed wearing a dead tracker linked to an inactive training file. A shepherd husky cross brought into a rescue in McCall, underweight and terrified of beeping sounds. A tan mixed-breed dog whose chip led back to a closed facility and then to Alder Companion veterans, same as Sage. Not all German shepherds, Livia said. Not all the same training stage, but the collars are similar. Damaged straps, battery issues, registration confusion. And every time someone called ACV, they got some version of case closed. Mara tapped the phrase with her pencil. "Case closed," she said. "The lullaby of people hoping no one opens the door?" Emmett stared at the photographs. None of the dogs looked heroic. That struck him, not because he expected heroism, but because the brochures did. On the website, the dogs sat upright in perfect light, noble as carved lions at temple gates. In the shelter photos, they looked like what they were: confused animals dragged through the machinery of human convenience. Sage sniffed one photograph, then backed away. Livia saw it and slid the folder out of reach. "She's doing better?" she asked. "She ate half her breakfast," Emmett said. "Hid the other half behind the stove brush." "That is not a food-safe location. I'm preparing a formal notice." Mara glanced up. "Please use pencil." For a moment, the office breathed. Then the case returned, large and cold. The name Tobin Rusk came from a maintenance note buried in a document Mara almost threw into the wrong stack. Former equipment coordinator, internal storage, device inventory. No longer employed. Livia knew him. Repairs furnaces now, she said. Works out of a blue van. His invoices are illegible, but his repairs hold. Mara found a number. Tobin did not answer the first call, or the second. On the third, after Mara left a message mentioning device logs and ACV internal records, he called back and said, "I don't know anything that helps you," which was often how people began when they knew exactly that they did. They met him behind a hardware store after closing, because Tobin said he was busy, and Mara said she preferred not to pretend that meant anything. He arrived in a brown work jacket stained with old oil, gray hoodie underneath, boots dusted white with salt. He was 46 or so, broad in the shoulders, hands thick and cracked from labor. His hair was dark, cut unevenly, and his jaw carried a rough beard that looked less like style than neglect. A ring of keys hung from his belt, one old brass key worn smooth at the edges. He looked at Emmett first, then Mara, then Sage. "What's the dog doing here?" he asked. "She has seniority," Mara said. Tobin did not smile. The hardware store's security light buzzed overhead. Snow slid along the edge of the parking lot in low white drifts. Somewhere behind the building, a dumpster lid banged once in the wind. Sage pressed closer to Emmett's leg. Mara showed Tobin a photograph of Sage's broken tracker. His face closed. "You've seen it," Emmett said. "I've seen a lot of collars." "That one?" Tobin looked away. "Harlan's second batch." Mara's pencil appeared as if conjured. "Second batch?" she asked. Tobin rubbed both hands over his face. "You didn't hear it from me." "Then say it clearly, and I'll decide what I heard." He gave her a hard look. Mara returned it with the calm of a woman who had survived printers and county offices. One angry man in a parking lot was not going to do what toner cartridges had failed to do. Tobin exhaled. The first batch worked all right, not perfect, but fine. The second batch was cheaper. Plastic got brittle below freezing, straps cracked, battery cases swelled, signal dropped in heavy weather. I sent notes. "To whom?" Mara asked. "Renee, operations, Miles Harlan's rep, anyone whose email was on the chain." "And?" "And they said full recall would cost too much. Bad optics, donor confidence, blah blah." His voice sharpened with shame disguised as irritation. "They told us to inspect as needed and mark replacements case by case." "But replacements weren't issued," Mara said. "Not enough. Dogs went out with faulty collars." Tobin's jaw tightened. "Some did." Sage shifted. The small movement drew all their eyes. The raw ring around her neck had begun to heal, but the fur there was still thin. In the harsh security light, the mark looked pale beneath the black and tan coat. Not dramatic, not graphic. Worse somehow because it was ordinary. A defect made visible on a living body. Tobin looked at her for half a second too long. Then he looked away. "Did you know a dog was missing?" Emmett asked. Tobin's shoulders rose. "I heard about transport problems." "That wasn't my question." Mara glanced at Emmett, but did not interrupt. Tobin's face flushed with cold or anger. "What do you want me to say? That I should have burned the place down? I had a job. I had debt. My ex-wife had medical bills. Renee kept saying it was temporary, that she was working on it, that if the program went under, nobody would get help. You think bad things come with horns? Mostly they come with payroll and a reason." Emmett stepped forward one pace. Sage stood with him. The night tightened. "I don't need horns," Emmett said. "I need to know why she was out there." Tobin's eyes flashed. "And I need to know why every man who shows up after the fact thinks he would have done better." The words hit hard because they were not entirely aimed at Emmett. They were aimed inward. Emmett could have answered with anger. Once, he might have. There was enough old force in him to fill the parking lot, but Sage was beside his leg, trembling at the raised voices, still choosing not to run. So Emmett looked down at her. When he spoke, his voice had changed. "I've stayed quiet when I should have called for help," he said. "I've made it sound like discipline when it was fear. I've let people think I was handling things because I didn't want anyone close enough to see I wasn't." Tobin did not move. Emmett kept his eyes on Sage. "I'm not standing here clean." The wind moved between them. There are moments when a man does not confess to be forgiven. He confesses because the truth has grown too heavy to carry alone, and seeing another creature stagger beneath its own burden makes pride look ridiculous. Tobin's anger lost its spine. He looked older suddenly. "I sent the warnings," he said, quieter. "I kept copies because I didn't trust the answers. Inventory sheets, batch numbers, internal emails, maintenance notes, device IDs that went inactive right after billing." Mara's pencil stopped. "Where are they?" she asked. "In a storage box at my place." "Will you give them to me?" Tobin looked toward the road, toward the town, toward all the ordinary lights behind which ordinary people kept ordinary secrets until they became disasters. "I don't want to be the story," he said. Mara's voice softened. "Then help make the records tell it without lying." He closed his eyes. The brass key on his belt shifted in the wind and clicked once against the others. "Tomorrow," he said. "I'll bring copies, not originals." "Copies are a start." "I'm not promising testimony." "No," Mara said. "You're promising tomorrow." Tobin gave her a bitter half-smile. "You always this cheerful?" "Only when freezing." He left without looking at Sage again. But when his van pulled away, Emmett saw him slow near the end of the lot, as if he had considered stopping, coming back, saying the thing properly. He did not. Not yet. That night, the siren came again. It rose from the valley while Emmett was rinsing Sage's bowl at the sink. A thin wail first, then nearer, then stretched across the dark like a wire pulled too tight. The bowl slipped from his hands and clattered into the sink. Emmett froze. The kitchen bent around him. The window became a blast-white opening. The counter became broken concrete. The hiss of the faucet became dust in his ears. He gripped the sink edge but could not feel his fingers. Somewhere far away, a man shouted for a medic. Somewhere close, the stove ticked like cooling metal. He lowered himself to the floor before his legs could decide for him. Breath left, did not return properly. Sage barked once from the back door, startled by the siren and the bowl, but the bark broke into a whine. She backed toward the corner, trembling. For a moment, she looked ready to disappear into herself. Then she stopped, her eyes fixed on Emmett. Whatever lesson lived inside her, whatever half-finished training had survived cold roads and bad hands and empty days, it stirred. Not perfectly, not bravely in the polished way brochures loved. She was shaking as she moved, but she moved. Sage crossed the kitchen one careful step at a time. She came to his side and lowered her body against his knee. Not enough to trap him. Enough to give the world an edge. Her weight was slight, far too slight, but real, warm through the fabric of his pants. Present. Emmett's hand found her back. The siren passed down the road and faded. Sage remained. Her body trembled against his leg. His hand trembled on her fur. Neither of them was calm. Neither of them had saved the other in any grand, shining way. But they had stayed in the same room. For Emmett, that felt like the first honest miracle he had seen in years. The next morning, Tobin brought the copies. He did not come upstairs to Mara's office at first. He stood in the laundromat below, holding a cardboard box sealed with duct tape, looking as though he might still turn around. Emmett saw him through the window and went down with Sage. Tobin looked at the dog. "I knew collars were failing," he said. Emmett said nothing. "I didn't know about her." "I believe that," Emmett said. Tobin swallowed. "Doesn't make it much better." "No." After a moment, Tobin handed him the box. Mara opened it upstairs. Inside were inventory logs, batch receipts from Harlan Field Systems, internal emails, replacement requests marked pending, and a spreadsheet of device IDs. Several were familiar now, inactive soon after billing. Case closed, completed, stable. The words had begun to lose their disguise. Mara sat back, pencil resting between her fingers. "This is enough to draft a complaint," she said. "Not enough to finish it cleanly. We need Tobin's sworn statement, and we need a legal animal welfare report on how Sage was found and why ACV cannot simply reclaim her as property." Emmett looked at the box, then at Sage, lying beneath the desk with her eyes open, chin on her paws. He had thought he was helping one lost dog. Now the room had filled with many dogs, most of them present only as codes, photographs, and lines in documents. Around them stood veterans whose names had been used like stamps, technicians who had looked away, donors who had believed a brochure, a director with a silver paw pin, a salesman with clean hands and failing collars. There were no monsters behind the door Mara had opened. That was the worst part. Only ordinary people, ordinary excuses, ordinary invoices. And somewhere inside that ordinariness, someone had learned how to make money from loneliness. Mara began sorting the documents into piles for the Idaho State Inspector General, the Veterans Funding Office, and a local investigative reporter she trusted enough to distrust professionally. Emmett watched her work. Sage breathed beneath the desk. Outside, Alder Creek continued under its white cover, looking peaceful from a distance, as winter always did before you tried to cross it. Mara Whitcomb said the word custody as if it were a chair with one broken leg. "It will hold," she told Emmett, "but only if we stop pretending everybody is going to behave nicely." They were in her office above the laundromat, where the windows had fogged from the machines below, and the heater made its usual goat-like complaints in the corner. The box Tobin Rusk had brought sat on the floor beside Mara's desk. Device logs, batch receipts, internal emails, maintenance notes, ordinary paper with an ugly pulse. Sage lay beneath Emmett's chair with her chin on his boot, not fully asleep, never fully asleep. But lately she allowed her eyes to close for longer stretches, as if trust had become a small loan she was willing to extend 1 minute at a time. Mara tapped the folder in front of her with a yellow pencil. "Alder Companion veterans may try to call her program property," she said. "They may say she belongs to them, that the collar belongs to them, that everything attached to this case belongs to them." Emmett looked down at Sage. "She's not a stapler." "No," Mara said. "But bad paperwork has a long history of treating living things like office supplies." Dr. Livia Marsh stood by the file cabinet, arms folded over her teal scrubs, her white coat dusted with dog hair. She was found under dangerous winter conditions, underweight, irritated neck, faulty device. I can document the medical side. But we need local law enforcement to document the condition she was found in. Emmett did not like the sound of that. He had spent years avoiding official rooms, official voices, official pens that asked a man to compress his pain into tiny boxes. He trusted Snow more than forms. Snow, at least, admitted it was cold. Mara read his face and answered before he spoke. "Deputy Claire Rourke," she said. "She handles a lot of the animal abandonment calls outside town. Practical." Quiet, not impressed by charity letterhead. "Does she need to come to the cabin?" "Yes." Emmett glanced toward the window. Snow moved against the glass in thin, wandering lines. "When?" "She's already on her way." He looked at Mara. She did not look sorry. "Efficient," he said. "I prefer the word prepared." "Of course you do." Deputy Claire Rourke arrived at Emmett's cabin that afternoon in a county SUV powdered with snow and road salt. She stepped out without hurry, tall and lean in a dark winter deputy's jacket, hair pulled into a low black-brown tail beneath a plain knit cap. Her face had the spare, weathered calm of someone raised among mountains and livestock, where panic was considered rude unless the barn was actually on fire. She did not ask to pet Sage. That immediately improved Emmett's opinion of her. Claire stood in the yard while the wind moved through the pines and listened as Emmett described where he had found the dog. Old gas station, broken tracker, plastic canister twisted into the cracked strap, heavy snow, no one nearby. She asked short questions and wrote shorter answers in a waterproof orange notebook. Distance from town center? 2 miles, give or take. Temperature that evening? Cold enough that my hands went numb before I finished cutting the plastic. Claire looked up. That is descriptive, Mr. Kessler, not measurable. Single digits, likely. Wind made it worse. She wrote that down. Inside the cabin, she photographed the broken tracker, the cut section of canister handle, the cracked strap, and the internal device Livia had sealed in a clear evidence bag. Sage watched from the kitchen threshold. The fur around her neck had begun to heal, but the pale rubbed line remained visible, a quiet accusation no speech could improve. Claire crouched, not toward Sage, just down to the level of the object on the floor, and took another photograph. Dr. Marsh sent medical notes, she said. Underweight, dehydration, collar irritation, no verified owner response. Alder Companion Veterans answered, Mara said from near the stove. They answered by not answering. Claire made a mark in her notebook. That counts for less than people hope. Emmett almost liked her then. Claire stood and looked around the cabin. Her gaze passed over the stove, Fern's blue scarf, the dog bowl placed near the wall, the blanket by the back door where Sage still slept, more often than not. She stays with Dr. Marsh as protective medical foster on paper, Claire said. You can remain the physical caretaker, provided the clinic agrees and no valid claimant appears with proper documentation. Valid, Mara repeated. Claire glanced at her. Not loud, not polished, valid. Sage moved behind Emmett's leg at the sound of Claire's radio crackling. Claire noticed, reached up, and turned the volume down. Good report, Mara said. Not a report yet. But it will be good. Claire's mouth moved slightly. It was not quite a smile, but somewhere in the neighborhood. By the time she left, Sage had a legal shape around her, thin but real. She was no longer merely a dog found in snow. She was an animal documented in hazardous conditions, under protective care, with a damaged device and no verified handler. The difference sounded small. To Emmett, it felt like the first fence post in a storm. Alder Companion Veterans felt it too. The first call came to Livia's clinic the next morning. A woman with a smooth voice said she was calling on behalf of Renee Calder and requested the immediate return of program-issued tracking equipment for warranty inspection. Livia put the call on speaker while Mara listened from her office and Emmett stood beside the exam table with Sage tucked close to his knee. Warranty inspection? Livia said. Yes, doctor, for quality assurance. The device was attached to an underweight dog found in severe winter conditions. We're certainly concerned about that and would like to evaluate whether the device was altered after it left our program. Livia's face did not change, but Emmett saw her fingers tighten around the pen. It is being preserved as part of an animal welfare report, she said. I'm sure that won't be necessary. Then we disagree. The voice paused. Warmth drained from it by 1/2 degree. Dr. Marsh, Alder Companion Veterans has always valued community cooperation. So have I, Livia replied. That's why I document things. She ended the call with professional courtesy and personal satisfaction. Mara, still on speaker, said, I may embroider that on a pillow." The second pressure came softer. A dark SUV idled across the road from Emmett's cabin near dusk, engine running, headlights off. It sat long enough for Sage to begin pacing between the kitchen and the back door. Emmett stood behind the curtain and watched without moving. He could not see the driver. His old training sorted details automatically. Position, distance, visibility, tire pattern, exit route. Then Claire's county vehicle rounded the bend at the end of the road. The SUV pulled away. Claire stopped beside Emmett's mailbox, rolled down her window, and looked at him standing on the porch. "Friend of yours?" "No." "Didn't think so." She wrote something in her orange notebook. The third pressure came by mail. Miles Harlan's company sent a letter saying the tracker may have been damaged by post-deployment mishandling or unauthorized interference, and that the company could not confirm product failure without direct possession of the device. Mara read the letter aloud in her office, then held it between two fingers. "Translation," she said. "If we can get the broken thing back, we can decide it was never broken." Sage, under the desk, sneezed. "Strong legal analysis," Mara told her. "None of it was a threat?" "Not exactly. No one raised a hand. No one shouted in the street. No one did anything that would look dramatic in a newspaper. It was just pressure, soft and dirty, like mud hidden beneath clean snow. A request here, a vehicle there, a letter with polite margins. The kind of pressure that counted on exhausted people deciding truth was too much trouble. And Emmett was exhausted. Not by Renee Calder, not by Miles Harlan, not even by the thought of a fight. He was exhausted by the possibility of staying alive long enough to finish one. The hospital called twice that week. The first time, he watched the phone ring on the kitchen counter until it stopped. Sage stood beside the bowl and stared at the sound as if it might leap from the device. The second time, he picked it up, saw the Boise number, and set it face down beneath a dish towel. Mara noticed his color one afternoon when he came to sign a statement. "You look like boiled candle wax," she said. "That's your professional opinion?" "No, my professional opinion is you should answer the medical calls you're dodging." "I'm here, aren't I?" "For Sage," Mara said. "Not for yourself." He said nothing. Livia was less delicate. "If you keep ignoring the liver appointments," she told him while checking Sage's neck, "you may lose the option of making your own choices later." Emmett looked at the dog instead of the doctor. "That's supposed to scare me?" "No," Livia said. "It's supposed to inform you. Fear appears to be something you manufacture independently." Jonah Vail called that evening, not for an update, though he asked for one, not to demand anything, though Emmett braced for it anyway. Jonah called because Mara had told him Emmett was being difficult, and Jonah said he liked to support difficult men by annoying them directly. "She picked you," Jonah said. "She didn't pick anybody." "She stayed." "That's not the same thing." "Sometimes it is." Emmett looked across the room. Sage lay by the back door, eyes open, head between her paws. She had eaten almost half her dinner. The rest sat behind the curtain where she had hidden it, badly. One piece stuck out in plain view. "She needs somebody steadier than me," Emmett said. Jonah was quiet a moment. "Probably," he said. "But she got you." "That's supposed to help?" "No, just keeps us honest." After the call, Emmett sat in the chair near the stove and let the dark gather in the corners of the room. The truth was not that he feared dying. Dying had become, over time, a hallway he had stopped refusing to walk down. What frightened him was the opposite: treatment, effort, appointments, hope rationed in small, humiliating doses. To live meant to be observed, tested, helped, told to come back next week. To live meant people might begin counting on him, and he might fail them by leaving anyway. Inside him there was a locked room where the dead had gone ahead, and he was only late. Fern had known about that room. Before her heart began failing in earnest, before the pill organizer and the breathless mornings and the chair in the hallway because stairs had become enemies, she had volunteered twice a week at the Alder Creek Library. On Thursdays, she helped run a coffee hour for veterans and their families. She brought lemon bars, arranged chairs, and spoke to men who looked past her shoulder because looking straight at kindness was too intimate. Once, she had brought home a brochure from Alder Companion veterans. Not that Emmett remembered the name then. He remembered only Fern standing at the kitchen counter, tapping a photograph of a dog beside a man with a cane. "You should think about it," she had said. "A dog? A support dog?" "I support myself." Fern had given him the look she reserved for statements so foolish they deserved ceremony. "You sleep sitting up when the wind hits the chimney wrong. That's tactical awareness. That is bad furniture and worse pride." He had laughed because Fern could still make him laugh then, even when she was tired. "I don't want some poor animal learning how to live around my nightmares." Fern had softened in that way she had, as if she had found the bruise beneath the joke. "Maybe it doesn't live around them," she said. "Maybe it pulls you out." He had dismissed it. Gently, but still dismissed it. He had kissed the top of her head and said they would talk later. Later had become one of those mythical countries people kept promising to visit. Now, months after she was gone, the sentence returned with teeth. "Maybe it pulls you out." That evening, Emmett tried to make dinner for himself and failed with remarkable efficiency. He opened soup, forgot the burner, remembered the burner, knocked a metal tray from the counter, and sent it crashing to the floor. The sound split the kitchen. Sage vanished beneath the table. It happened so fast that Emmett's own body reacted before his mind did. His shoulders locked. His breath shortened. The tray spun once on the floor and settled with a final metallic wobble. Under the table, Sage trembled so hard her teeth clicked. Emmett bent instinctively, hand reaching, then he stopped. He saw her eyes, not disobedient, not foolish, not dramatic, terrified. His hand remained in the air, useless and ashamed. Slowly he lowered himself to the floor several feet away. His hip complained. His back tightened. He ignored both. He placed one hand flat on the floorboards, palm down, fingers open. "I know," he said softly. Sage pressed herself deeper into shadow. "I know." The words were not much, but they were true. He did not tell her she was safe. Safe was a promise too large for a man who had learned how quickly ceilings could fall, hearts could fail, collars could break, and friendly organizations could write lies in clean fonts. Instead, he told her about Fern. Not all at once, not the sacred parts, just small things first. "She used to dance in the kitchen when the radio came in clear," he said. "Badly? Don't tell her I said that. She believed enthusiasm counted as rhythm." Sage's trembling did not stop, but it changed. "She put pepper in everything, even eggs, said food ought to wake up before people ate it." The stove ticked. Wind moved snow against the window. Emmett swallowed. "She wanted me to get a dog." Sage's eyes shone beneath the table. "I said no. I said I didn't want anything else having to deal with what was in my head." He looked at his hand on the floor. The fingers were scarred, older than he remembered. Truth was, I didn't want anything else close enough to notice. The room held still. Emmett felt the old words rising, ones he had never said to Fern fully, never to the families, never to doctors who asked with pens ready. "2 men died in front of me," he said. "And I kept breathing. That's the part nobody knows what to do with. People say surviving is a gift. Sometimes it feels like you stole something and don't know where to return it." Sage did not understand the words, but she understood the shape of his voice. Low, steady, Not reaching, not taking, not demanding, she become brave on his schedule. After several minutes, she slid one paw forward, then another. She did not come out all the way. She rested her chin at the edge of the table shadow, still hidden, still watching. Emmett did not move toward her. "That's enough," he whispered. Much later, Sage emerged. She sniffed the metal tray from a distance, decided it was an enemy already defeated, and went to her bowl. She ate half the food Emmett had set down earlier. Then, as usual, she took a small portion carefully in her mouth and carried it behind the curtain. Emmett watched without comment. He expected her to leave it there until morning. Near midnight, while the fire had burned low and the cabin was blue with moonlit snow, Sage rose from the back door. Emmett sat in the chair, too tired to read, too awake to sleep. She crossed the room quietly, nosed behind the curtain, retrieved the hidden food, and carried it back to the bowl. Then she ate it. All of it. No ceremony, no swelling music, no sudden transformation into a dog who trusted the world. Just a thin German shepherd eating the piece of tomorrow she had hidden from today. Emmett felt his mouth move. A small smile. So small Fern would have teased him for being stingy with it. "There you are," she would have said. "That face does still have windows." He sat very still, afraid that if he noticed too loudly, the moment would flee. Sage licked the bowl once, then returned to the back door. But before lying down, she looked at him. Only for a second. It was not gratitude. It was inventory. "You are still here. The bowl is still here. The roof did not fall. The food came back." Emmett nodded as if receiving a report. The next morning, Tobin Rusk called Mara and agreed to sign a sworn statement. Mara phoned Emmett immediately. "After the storm passes, we meet at my office. Tobin, Livia, Jonah, if he can make the drive, and Claire for the report. I'll attach the final supplements and send everything." Emmett looked through the window at the sky lowering over the pines. Another storm was coming, larger than the last, the kind that made the mountains vanish one ridge at a time. "After the storm," he said. "Yes." He could hear Mara shuffling papers. "And Emmett?" "What?" "Stay available." He almost made a joke. He did not. When the call ended, he looked down at his phone. The hospital reminder glowed on the screen. Boise Liver Clinic. Missed call. Follow-up needed. For a moment, his thumb hovered over delete by habit. Sage stood beside him, silent. Her head tilted slightly, right ear bent in that worried way that made her look less like a noble shepherd and more like a question the world had failed to answer kindly. Emmett let the screen dim. He did not call. Not yet. But he did not delete the reminder. He set the phone face up on the table, beside Fern's cracked white mug and the folded copy of Sage's protective care report. It was not hope. Hope was still too bright, too reckless, too much like stepping onto ice before testing it. It was only a small thing left unextinguished. A match in a dark room. Outside, the first snow of the coming storm began to fall. Inside, Sage lay down near the back door, the bowl empty behind her. The storm reached Alder Creek after sunset. It did not come politely. It came dragging the mountains behind it, filling the roads, burying fence posts, erasing tire tracks before they had time to become evidence that anyone had passed. Wind moved through the pines above Emmett Kessler's cabin with the long, rising voice of something ancient and displeased, as if the trees had been turned into a choir and given only warnings to sing. Mara had called twice before the phone lines began to stutter. "We're still on for the final packet," she said the first time. Tobin sent the signed inventory statement. Jonah scanned his declaration. Claire's report is attached. Livia's medical notes are clean. "Clean," Emmett repeated, looking out the window at the snow running sideways through the porch light. "In the legal sense," Mara said. "Not in the moral sense. Morally, this thing is a mudslide wearing church shoes." He almost smiled. The second time she called, her voice cut in and out. "If the power holds, I send tonight. If it doesn't, I send from Livia's clinic in the morning. Either way, the supplements go." Emmett looked down at Sage. She lay beside the stove, not at the back door. That was new enough to feel fragile. Her bowl sat empty near the wall. No hidden pieces behind the curtain. No solemn deposit in his boot. She had eaten slowly, with several pauses, but she had eaten all of it, while he pretended to be very interested in fixing the stove poker. "We'll be here," he told Mara. "Answer your phone if I call." "You always this bossy?" "Only when people give me excellent reasons." The line clicked off. Emmett set the phone on the table beside Fern's cracked white mug and the hospital reminder he still had not deleted. Outside, the storm pressed itself against the cabin as if testing for weak places. Behind the house, uphill through the pines, an old gas line ran from a small auxiliary tank near the service shed. Emmett had meant to have it inspected before deep winter. He had also meant to fix the loose porch rail, mail 3 letters, call the liver clinic, and throw away the stale crackers Fern had once bought because they were good with soup, even though both of them had known they tasted like disciplined cardboard. A man could fill a whole life with things he meant to do. The wind struck the cabin hard enough to make the windows tremble. Sage lifted her head. "You and me both," Emmett said. She stood, crossed the room, and sniffed near the back door. Then she moved to the kitchen, nose low, following a line only she could read. Emmett watched her, but not with alarm yet. Sage had become particular about the world. She noticed sounds before he did, smells he could not name, changes in the room so small they felt like superstition until later. 2 days earlier, near the clinic's generator, she had stiffened and pulled back from the sharp smell of propane before Emmett had even noticed it. Livia had said Sage might have been kept at some point near a storage area where battery acid, warm plastic, fuel, and damp concrete mixed in the air. Some dogs remember danger by sound, Livia had told him, some by smell, some by the way a room feels before humans have a word for it. Mara had also found a training note in Sage's partial file. Wake and lead. Candidate dog demonstrated early response to handler inactivity and environmental disturbance. Continue reinforcement. A line in a file. A little star left in a torn sky. Emmett had read it 3 times and said nothing. Now Sage sniffed the seam beneath the back door. Then she sneezed. Emmett frowned. "You smell that draft? I know. This house has character." Sage turned toward him, her right ear angled down. Not fear exactly, not yet. Concern. Then, from somewhere uphill, the night cracked. It was not a sharp sound like thunder. It was a deep wooden groan, followed by a long tearing rush, the sound of an old pine losing an argument it had been having with the wind for 80 years. The house shook when the tree came down. Snow slid from the roof in a heavy sheet. Emmett rose too quickly, and pain cinched around his side. He gripped the chair until it passed. Sage barked once. The power blinked, held. "Tree," he said. "Just a tree." But the cabin had changed. He did not know how at first. Nothing dramatic, no smoke, no alarm. The stove still burned low. The lights still glowed. The walls still stood around them with their old, tired patience. Then Sage began to move. She went to the boots by the door and dragged one into the middle of the room. "Sage!" She went back for the other boot. "Sage, leave it." She ignored him. The second boot landed crookedly beside the first. Then she pulled Fern's blue scarf from its peg, not roughly, but with urgency, the fabric slipping down like a piece of fallen sky. Emmett stood very still when it hit the floor. "Don't!" he said, sharper than he meant. Sage froze. For one painful second, she looked like the dog from the first night, thin, braced, expecting correction to become harm. Emmett closed his eyes. "No," he said more softly. "That was me, not you." Sage picked up the scarf again. This time she carried it toward him and dropped it at his feet. The gesture struck him harder than the fallen tree. Fern's scarf, his boots, the door, a strange little altar made of leaving. The wind roared. Somewhere beyond the wall, the fallen pine shifted under its own weight. Sage went to the back door and scratched at the mat. Not digging, not panic, insistence. Emmett looked toward the kitchen. A faint smell hung there now. Thin, wrong, almost nothing. His mind, tired and dulled by pain medication, tried to file it under old house smell, storm smell, stove smell, wet dog smell. But Sage's whole body had become an arrow. She barked. Not the startled bark she had given when a tray fell, not the uncertain sound she used when a truck passed too close. This bark was rough, urgent, and commanding. It belonged to some part of her that had been trained before hunger and cold and paperwork turned her into a line item. Emmett stepped toward the back door. The smell grew clearer. Gas, quiet as a secret, thin as a lie. He reached for his phone, but his hand did not close around it right away. Because the wind hit the house again, and in that sound he heard another night. Not Idaho, dust, metal. A warning he had missed or had not been able to answer fast enough. A pressure wave that lifted the world and set it down broken. Voices calling through smoke. His own body refusing to move while others needed him to move. The cabin stretched and bent. The stove became heat through debris. The pine outside became a collapsing wall. Emmett could hear a siren that was not there yet. His knees locked. Sage jumped onto the chair. The movement snapped something open in the room. She shoved her muzzle into his hand, hard enough to make his fingers curl by reflex. Then she grabbed the loose fabric at the knee of his pants and pulled. Once, twice. Not biting. Leading. Her paws slid on the floorboards. Her thin body strained with all the stubbornness hunger had not managed to steal. Emmett looked down. The dog who had once flinched from his hand was now putting her mouth on his clothing and trusting him to understand. "Okay," he whispered. The word barely came out. Sage pulled again. This time, he moved. He grabbed his phone, shoved one boot halfway on, abandoned the second, then realized she had dragged it there for him and forced his foot into it. He wrapped Fern's scarf around his neck without thinking. The wool smelled faintly of cedar and old smoke, or maybe memory supplied that kindness because the night had become too sharp. He opened the front door. Wind struck him like a wall. Snow burst into the room. Sage pushed past his legs, then stopped on the porch and looked back, barking once more. Not away from him. For him. Emmett stepped outside. The smell was stronger in the open air near the side of the house. He called 911 with fingers gone clumsy from cold and adrenaline. "This is Emmett Kessler," he said when the dispatcher answered. "Gas line damage. Possible leak. Pine down behind the cabin. I'm outside with the dog." The dispatcher's voice was calm, blessedly ordinary. "Are you able to move away from the structure?" "Yes." "Do that now. Do not turn electrical switches on or off. Do not re-enter the home." "I'm not going back in." Sage stood at the base of the porch steps, staring at him as though she intended to hold him legally accountable to that sentence. He almost laughed. It came out as a cough. The truck was half buried but reachable. Emmett led Sage to it, opened the passenger door, and climbed in after her. The engine turned over on the second try. Heat began its weak crawl through the vents. They sat in the dark truck while the storm swallowed the cabin 20 yards away. Sage stood on the passenger seat, front paws braced, eyes fixed on the house. Snow melted in her coat. Her breath fogged the glass. Emmett kept one hand on her back, not to calm her only, but to believe in the present. The first emergency lights appeared as red and blue ghosts through the trees. Then came the siren. Emmett's body went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the storm. The sound reached into him with old fingers. His breath caught. The truck cab shrank. The windshield became smoke-white. The lights flashed like warnings across dust. He felt himself sliding toward that broken place where time did not move properly. Sage turned. She pressed her body against his ribs, awkwardly, urgently, nearly climbing into his lap. She was shaking too. The siren hurt her, the lights confused her, but she stayed. Her weight was slight, too slight for the size a shepherd should have been, yet it was enough to give gravity a name. Emmett put his palm flat against her side. There. Warmth, tremor, breath. He followed it. In, out. Not healed, not unafraid. Here. The fire crew parked at the edge of the drive. Men in heavy gear moved with practiced caution, shapes in stormlight. One of them approached the truck and spoke through a cracked window, telling Emmett to stay put until they checked the line and shut off the supply. Emmett nodded. Words felt too large. Sage kept leaning into him. When Deputy Claire Rourke arrived behind the fire truck, she walked to the driver's side and looked from Emmett to Sage. "Dog found it?" Emmett looked at Sage. The shepherd's amber eyes remained fixed on the cabin, ears low, body tense. "She insisted," he said. Claire nodded once, as if that were a perfectly valid emergency procedure. It took more than an hour to secure the property. The fallen pine had struck the auxiliary line near the service shed and cracked a joint. The leak had been small, but in a closed house, small dangers were just patient ones. By the time the fire chief told Emmett the cabin would need to stay locked until repairs were complete, the storm had thickened until even the porch light looked tired. "You got somewhere to go?" Claire asked. Before Emmett could answer, his phone rang. "Livia." Claire saw the name on the screen and said, "Answer that. She'll be less polite if I call her." Livia did not waste time. "Clinic guest room," she said. "Back building. I'll unlock it. Bring Sage's food if you have it." "House is closed." "I said bring it if you have it, not stage a rescue mission for kibble." Emmett looked at Sage, who had finally lowered herself onto the seat, but kept one paw pressed against his thigh. "We'll come." "Good," Livia said. And Emmett? "What?" "Listen to the dog more often." The clinic's guest room was small, built behind the main building for overnight emergencies, and stranded clients who learned too late that Idaho roads did not care about confidence. It had one narrow bed, a space heater, a scarred table, 2 chairs, and a window looking out toward the generator shed. Livia had left towels, bottled water, and a bag of soft food by the door. Sage entered first. She sniffed every corner, checked the bed, checked the window, checked the door. Then, instead of taking position against the exit, she returned to Emmett and stood beside the table. Not relaxed, but present. Mara arrived an hour later with her laptop under her coat and snow in her hair. She looked at Emmett's one boot tied badly, Fern's scarf around his neck, and Sage pressed against his leg. "I was told the dog saved your stubborn life," she said. Emmett eased himself into a chair. That sounds like something Claire would say with fewer words. Claire said, and I quote, "Dog did good. Man survived." Accurate. Mara set up her laptop on the scarred table. The storm battered the little building, but the clinic power held. Livia came in briefly, checked Sage's breathing, checked Emmett's color, frowned at both, and left them with tea that tasted like bark but was warm. The gas incident did not become the whole case. Mara was careful about that. "This doesn't prove the funding fraud," she said, typing. "It proves risk. It proves the consequences of abandoning a trained candidate dog with defective equipment. It supports urgency. It supports protective care. It shows Sage's training had value and that ACV's failures nearly erased it." Nearly, Emmett said. Mara glanced at Sage. Nearly. The final supplements gathered like travelers arriving through snow. Jonah's signed declaration came by scanned attachment, slightly crooked, with a note at the bottom. Make me sound smarter if needed. Mara smiled for the first time all night and wrote back that sworn statements were not allowed to improve upon the witness, however tempting. Tobin's confirmation arrived next, a signed statement verifying the Harlan second batch defects, internal warnings, and replacement requests marked pending. It was not poetic. It was better than poetic. It was specific. Claire sent the animal welfare report and a short incident addendum noting Sage's response before the gas leak was identified. Livia attached medical records, photographs, and her professional note that the collar's condition was consistent with prolonged wear, cold damage, and inadequate maintenance. Last came the signature line for Emmett. He read the document slowly. The words were careful and legal, but beneath them he saw the old gas station, Sage shaking in the snow, Jonah's kitchen, Tobin's lowered eyes, Fern's scarf on the floor like a blue flame. Mara turned the laptop toward him. "You don't have to make a speech," she said. "Just read the statement and sign if it's true." Emmett looked down. Sage had settled beneath the table. Her head rested on his boot. Not hidden, not guarding the door, not storing food behind furniture for a future that might starve her. Just there. A tired little guardian who had pulled him away from invisible smoke. He signed. Mara checked the attachments once, then again. Pencil beside laptop, old habits refusing to be replaced by technology. At 1:17 in the morning, while the storm shook the clinic guest room and the town slept beneath a white weight, Mara sent the final packet to the Idaho State Inspector General's office, the Veterans Funding Administrator, and the reporter she trusted enough to distrust professionally. No trumpet sounded. No villain fell. The laptop simply made a soft sent message chime. Mara leaned back. Livia, standing in the doorway with her arms folded, closed her eyes for 1 second. Emmett rested his hand on Sage's back. The dog exhaled. Outside, winter kept raging, offended perhaps that its work had been interrupted. Inside, beneath a scarred table in a borrowed room, Sage slept with her head on Emmett's foot. No food hidden, no door watched, only a thin, brave animal and the man she had dragged back from the edge of a quiet danger, both breathing as if morning were not guaranteed, but had become possible. Justice did not arrive in Alder Creek like thunder. It did not split the sky, shake the mountains, or march into town wearing polished boots. No one was led away in front of a courthouse while cameras flashed. No flag snapped proudly above a speech. No old wound closed because a government office finally opened the right folder. Justice came like a man shoveling snow before dawn. Slow, cold, bent-backed, one bladeful at a time. 3 days after the storm, while Emmett Kessler and Sage were still sleeping in the narrow guest room behind Dr. Livia Marsh's clinic, Mara Whitcomb received the first reply. It came from the Idaho State Inspector General's office at 6:42 in the morning, with careful language and a case number that looked too small for the weight placed upon it. Mara printed it anyway. The printer in her office jammed halfway through, perhaps out of respect for tradition. She called Emmett while wrestling the paper loose. "They opened a review," she said. Emmett sat on the edge of the clinic guest bed, one boot on, one boot still unlaced. Sage lay on the rug near the table, head lifted, eyes fixed on the phone as if Mara's voice might step through it. "That good?" he asked. "It is not victory," Mara said. "It is a door no one can pretend is a wall." By noon, the Veterans Funding Administrator had requested supporting documents from Alder Companion veterans. By evening, the regional newspaper's investigative reporter had confirmed receipt of the packet and asked to verify dates, names, device IDs, and whether Jonah Vail would speak on record. Jonah agreed, but only after telling Mara, "If they photograph me, I'm wearing the good flannel. And Sherman is not to be described as overweight. He is structurally confident. Mara promised nothing regarding the cat. The first public notice appeared 4 days later. Alder Companion veterans had voluntarily paused new placements pending review. Mara read the phrase aloud in her office and nearly broke her pencil. "Voluntarily," she said. "That word is doing more gymnastics than a circus horse." The pause did not feel like much to people who wanted fireworks. But to Mara, Livia, Claire Rourke, Jonah, Tobin Rusk, and Emmett, it meant something. It meant no new veteran would be told a dog had arrived when the porch remained empty. No new candidate dog would be counted as delivered while still trapped inside someone else's lie. Not today. Soon after, a funding account connected to completed placement reimbursements was frozen for audit. Harlan Field Systems received an urgent recall order for its second batch tracking collars. Shelters across the state were asked to report dogs found with damaged ACV-issued devices. The codes that had once slept quietly in reports began to wake. ACV SD 4179 was no longer just a number inside Sage's broken collar. It had become a key. Some doors opened, some opened onto grief. A black lab mix was found in a rescue outside McCall, still afraid of electronic beeps. A tan dog with cloudy eyes was traced to a placement file marked stable, though the veteran listed in the report had moved into assisted living before the supposed delivery date. A shepherd mix had been adopted months earlier by a ranch couple who thought he was only a stray with a strange collar. Other codes led nowhere. The trails had gone cold. Records were incomplete. Dogs had been rehomed without chip updates. Some people had moved. Some had stopped answering calls because answering had disappointed them too many times. Mara said it plainly. "We will not find every dog." Emmett did not argue. He had learned long ago that not every name came home when called. Renee Calder released a statement through Alder Companion Veterans saying the organization took all concerns seriously. She blamed legacy data systems, vendor delays, staffing shortages, weather-related transport complications, miscommunications with applicants, and isolated process failures. She expressed gratitude for community patience. She used the word gratitude 6 times. In the photograph attached to the newspaper story, her silver paw print pin caught the light near her heart. Miles Harlan said the devices met the agreed specifications and that failures appeared connected to improper handling, unauthorized modification, or environmental extremes beyond normal expected use. Claire read that line and said, "In Idaho, winter is not an environmental extreme. It is Wednesday." Tobin Rusk testified in a closed administrative interview first. He wore a green shirt that looked as if it had been ironed by a man who considered ironing an apology. His hand shook when he signed the statement. He admitted he had warned Renee's office about the cracked straps, swollen battery casings, dropped signals, and replacement delays. He admitted he had kept copies because he had not trusted the answers. He also admitted he had not done enough. That last part cost him more than the rest. Jonah testified by video because the roads were still bad near Kettle Lake. Sherman crossed behind him twice and once sat directly in front of the camera, which Jonah claimed was an act of civic engagement. Jonah told the investigator he had practiced commands for a dog that never came. He described the emails, the delays, the final message thanking him for a successful placement. Then he looked away from the screen and said, "You don't get to deliver hope on paper and call the empty porch a success." Emmett heard the recording later in Mara's office. He said nothing for a long time. Sage lay beside his chair, no longer fully under it. That was new. She still liked shadows, still liked walls at her back, still lifted her head at footsteps on the stairs. But she had begun choosing the open space beside him instead of the deepest corner. It was a small geography of trust. The legal matter of Sage moved more slowly, as all human systems did when asked to recognize a heart. For 2 weeks, she remained under protective medical foster through Dr. Livia's clinic, with Emmett listed as physical caretaker. Claire's report documented the night Sage had been found, the damaged collar, the canister twisted into the strap, and the condition of her neck and body. Livia's notes confirmed neglect of the equipment and the medical risk of prolonged exposure. Mara filed notice to any valid claimant. Alder Companion veterans did not produce a proper handler, owner, transfer receipt, or lawful claim. They produced language. Mara was better with language. At the end of the required period, she placed a stack of adoption papers in front of Emmett at the clinic's little back table. Livia stood nearby with her arms folded. Claire leaned against the doorway, snow melting on the shoulders of her deputy jacket. Sage sat beside Emmett's chair, her right ear tilted, watching everyone as if she suspected the meeting involved food she was not being offered. "There is one condition," Livia said. Emmett looked up. "For Sage?" "For you." Mara's mouth twitched. Claire looked out the window, but Emmett suspected she was listening very carefully. Livia placed a folded hospital reminder beside the adoption papers. Emmett recognized it. He had left it on the table in the clinic guest room, probably hoping paper could feel embarrassed and walk away on its own. "You keep your liver appointment," Livia said. "You take what they prescribe unless you have a medical reason not to. You update me if your condition affects Sage's care." Emmett stared at her. "That in the paperwork?" "No," Livia said. "That is in the part where I refuse to hand a recovering dog to a man pretending to be a haunted fence post." Mara nodded solemnly. "For the record, I have never drafted an adoption file so close to a legal order requiring a man to stop behaving like a decorative corpse." Claire's mouth moved again, almost a smile. Emmett looked down at Sage. The dog looked back. He remembered the storm, Fern's scarf in Sage's mouth, the boot dragged across the floor, the bite that had not been a bite, the pull that had been a command. "Move, live, come with me." He signed the adoption papers. His hand paused above the hospital reminder. Then he folded it and put it in his shirt pocket. Livia said nothing. That was her kindness. By the time Emmett returned to his cabin, the gas line had been repaired, the fallen pine cut into sections, and the back slope left scarred, but safe. The house smelled faintly of cold wood, soap, and the absence of danger. Still, Emmett opened every window for 10 minutes, letting winter march through and inspect the place like an offended general. Sage followed him from room to room, not glued to him, not panicked, just near. He replaced the old mat by the back door with a thick new one that did not curl at the edges. He bought Sage a proper bowl, heavy ceramic, pale green like the sage fern used to grow. He placed a dog bed near the stove, close enough for warmth, far enough from the door that it made a statement. Sage sniffed the bed, then circled it, then walked away and lay by the back door. Emmett looked at the empty bed. "Well," he said. That was a moving display of gratitude. Sage ignored him, but the next morning he found one paw resting on the edge of the bed. By the 3rd day, she slept half on it. By the 5th, she lay fully in it with her head lifted, as if making clear she had not been conquered by comfort, but had chosen to occupy it for strategic reasons. Fern's slippers remained beside the stove. For a long time, Emmett had seen them as proof of absence. Now, with Sage's new bed not far away and the green bowl against the wall, the slippers seemed different. Not less sad. Nothing true ever became less true simply because time passed. But they no longer looked like a shrine to an ending. They looked like evidence. Love had lived here once. Love, stubborn as a weed through cracked pavement, had found a second route. Sage changed in the same manner winter changed into spring in mountain country. Slowly, suspiciously, with frequent reversals. She still startled at metal sounds. She still watched strangers too carefully. she still checked the space behind the curtain after meals, as if hunger might have left a forwarding address there. But one evening, while snow fell gently instead of violently, Emmett placed her bowl down and stepped back. Sage ate 3 bites, paused, looked at him, ate more, paused again, looked toward the curtain. Emmett kept his eyes on the stove poker, pretending to inspect it with great seriousness. Sage returned to the bowl. She finished it, every piece. Then she stood over the empty bowl and looked around the cabin. No one came to take it. No door opened. No hand reached down to punish her for trusting the meal. The roof held. The stove warmed. Fern's scarf hung on its peg. Emmett sat in his chair, alive and trying not to make a scene about a dog eating dinner. Sage licked the bowl once. Then she walked to the center of the room, turned in a circle, and lay down with her belly full and her eyes closing. Not by the back door, not under the table, in the open. Emmett's throat tightened. He had seen medals pinned to uniforms, flags folded, ships at dawn, mountains under moonlight, and men perform impossible acts of courage without anyone ever knowing their names. None of it felt braver than that thin German shepherd sleeping where the room could see her. He waited until she was fully asleep. Then he picked up the phone. The Boise Liver Clinic answered on the 3rd ring. A woman with a brisk, kind voice asked how she could help. Emmett looked at Sage near the stove. He looked at Fern's mug. He looked at the hospital reminder, softened at the crease from being folded and unfolded too many times. "I need to schedule the follow-up I missed," he said. There was typing. "Name?" "Emmett Kessler." More typing. A pause. "We've been trying to reach you, Mr. Kessler." "I know." "Would next Tuesday work?" Emmett closed his eyes. For a second, Fern's voice came back, not as a ghost, not as magic, only as memory finally allowed to enter the room without breaking anything. "Maybe it pulls you out." He opened his eyes. "Yes," he said. His voice was rough but clear. "Next Tuesday works." The morning after that, the storm clouds finally moved east. Alder Creek emerged white and wounded beneath a pale sun. Snow glittered on roofs. The pines stood bowed but unbroken. The old gas station at the edge of town looked smaller in daylight, just a closed building beneath a working lamp, though Emmett knew some temples looked ordinary after miracles had passed through them. He clipped Sage's new leash to her new collar. It was soft brown leather, chosen by Livia, approved by Mara, and inspected by Claire, as if it were a structural bridge. The tag was small, shaped like a sage leaf. On one side, Sage. On the other, Emmett Kessler and his phone number. Sage sniffed it when he first put it on. Then she sneezed. "Fine," Emmett said. "Your review has been noted." He wore his old canvas coat over the olive combat shirt, Fern's scarf tucked at his throat, because the morning was cold and because he was tired of pretending warmth was betrayal. His steps were slow. The illness had not left him because he had made one phone call. His body still carried its warnings. Pain still moved inside him like weather trapped under skin, but he walked. Sage walked beside him. She did not pull toward the trees. She did not crouch at every gust. She did not look back at the cabin as if expecting to be thrown out of it. Her right ear still tilted when the wind shifted, and she watched the road with the caution of one who had learned too much too early, but she stayed at his side by choice. At the end of the drive, Emmett stopped. The world was almost painfully bright. Snow lay over Alder Creek like a blank page no one had yet ruined. In the distance, a plow moved slowly down the road, clearing a path with patient iron. Somewhere in town, Mara was probably sharpening a pencil against fresh foolishness. Livia was probably telling a Labrador to stop eating things no decent creature should consider food. Claire was probably writing something brief and devastating in her orange notebook. Jonah was probably arguing with Sherman about whether cats could be subpoenaed. The thought made Emmett smile. Not much. Enough. Sage leaned lightly against his leg. He looked down at her. She looked up. There was no need to thank each other. Gratitude between survivors often looked less like words and more like staying close when the road widened. Emmett had saved Sage from a broken collar and a plastic canister in the snow. Sage had saved Emmett from a house filling with invisible danger. But the deeper rescue was quieter than both. They had begun to save each other from the habit of defense, from sleeping by the door, from hiding food for a famine that might not come, from letting illness become permission to disappear, from believing that if the world had once failed them, it would always fail them in the same way. Emmett did not beat winter. Sage did not forget fear. The system was not healed because one file had been sent and one program had been paused. Somewhere, auditors were still sorting through polite lies. Somewhere, a dog might still be waiting to be found. Somewhere, a veteran might still be looking at an empty porch and wondering if he had imagined the promise. But here, on this road, under a pale Idaho sun, one man and one German shepherd took another step. Then another. Not triumphant, not cured. Still here. And sometimes, in a world so skilled at burying things beneath snow, staying was the most stubborn kind of victory. Sometimes healing does not arrive like a great miracle. Sometimes it comes quietly, through a dog who learns to eat the food she once hid, and a man who finally chooses to make one phone call toward living. Emmett and Sage remind us that being broken does not mean being beyond grace. The world may fail us, people may overlook us, and winter may cover the road for a while. But God can still place a small, faithful light beside us, something gentle enough to stay and strong enough to lead us back. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from, and if you believe in these quiet miracles, please like and subscribe to help our channel grow. May peace find you gently, and may hope stay beside you when the night feels long.